Yeah, before you program this software, you have to gather all the data. But this data you do by yourself to get this data, or just collaborate with other people who study social science.
So if you say this data, what do you mean by this data? Maybe I'm
this data, you just if you want to program this software, you have to get some data. You have to design this project. So firstly, you have to get all this data. One group like this one, another group doesn't like this one. You have get all these data, and then you just program this this software, and then people can use it.
So if I interpret your question correctly, and you may want to correct me because I'm not sure I do understand it correctly, is there are multiple layers here at work, right? Yeah. So I need to know who the people are out there, right? I need to have a marketplace for human computers, right? Because otherwise I can't coordinate it. I need to know who's out there. Or I need to have a way to advertise my activities. I need to have data about the task at hand. Now, I could devise a program that collects the data, right? So some of these, so the thing of the San Marco square that I showed you before was a simple program to collect a 3D model of well-visited places in the world. So that's a data collection social program, if you want to say so. So it is mostly, I think the most scarce resources is understand a problem and being able to devise an appropriate program to solve that problem, and that is from, in my opinion, the scarcest resource. It's not having the data available in a database, because you could outsource or crowdsource that part of the step. Ask people to. So there are these people. I don't know whether you guys do this here as well in Zurich, who essentially in some of these big parties in town, they ask people to install a certain app on their cell phones, and then the sensory input of that cell phone is being used to find out whether panic is somewhere in town, to send the police there. So you could use crowds of people to sense about what's happening in a crowd and to take preventative measures. So I think the scarce resource is not data as such, but it's people who can and are able to program such programs and have an understanding, because it's suddenly not just computer scientists, right? So this is people who need to have an intricate understanding of what it means to organize, to coordinate and cultivate large groups of people. And arguably, that is a very scarce resource. I think we need to teach our students different skills than we've done so far. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think your talk has further illustrated the kind of difference in a perspective that we have here in the Global Brain Institute and your perspective. Our perspective is more towards self-organization. So, for example, with the crowd of people with all cell phones, you just ask them to carry a little app. You don't ask them to do anything particular, but the sensor will record if something happens, if lots of people suddenly start moving in the same direction. So you're not actually programming them. You're sensing, you're interpreting that, and using the data maybe to coordinate the activity of the police or the fire brigade. While the examples you gave here are all examples where you have a specific task that needs to be done, and you're using a crowd of people. And I wonder, what is the difference between this and just crowdsourcing or human computation? What is the global brain dimension that you add to that?
Bringing us back to the discussion we had yesterday, how centralized or decentralized is this? And I think the difference, and that's what I think the point that I was trying to make yesterday, is that the examples here are examples of some central entity having designed a centralized program that coordinates all the agents out there. I don't see any reason why this centralized program cannot be partitioned horizontally and vertically out and be distributed. What I mean with
distribution is not a problem, but it's not global.
Why isn't it global?
It's just a crowd that you select from maybe a crowd of billions of people. you're not programming the global brain, you're programming a particular part that's willing to go along with your particular incentive structure. It's not the same as coordinating what happens in China and what happens in Australia, what happens in the US. And
why not? I'm sorry, I don't think I see this. So, okay, I've seen many people who are into kind of emergent behavior, etc., who have this notion or belief that you need to have a decentral set of rules and what comes just emerges in a miracle. It doesn't mean that this decentral set of rules weren't designed centrally and just people were, sorry, we were talking before about nudging, right? I mean, that's what politicians do. They write a decentralized program, right? They put together a set of rules that will hopefully make us behave the right way. In Switzerland, they charge us for trash. We pay 2 francs for a 35-liter bag of trash. I don't know whether you have this here, but we have this in Switzerland. The result of this is that we all went back to the supermarkets, and they made a second rule that requires supermarkets to take back packaging material that's not soiled. So people started to unpack their stuff at the supermarket and leave the trash there, which led to the supermarkets call the producers and say, put less packaging material in, which means today when you buy a package of cornflakes, all you get is a shrink-wrapped plastic with cornflakes in it. You don't get the cardboard outside. What is that emergent behavior? Is that a global brain program for you, or is it not? Because I can put it into my framework.
The problem is, you assume that there is a given task that needs to be done. But what I'm interested in, all these given tasks of which I will business, they need to be coordinated. So what you're assuming is, I already know what I have to do. I want to have this thing translated. So now I coordinate the different workers in my pool, in my code, to do this translation as quickly as possible. For me, the global brain is, yeah, but doing this translation, is that the most important thing that should be done at this level, at this moment? Yeah, it may be handy if you can use this pool for it, but it's also a question of putting all the priorities on all different tasks. The coordination is also a coordination of different objectives, tasks, values, goals. That needs to be coordinated, and that can only be done by self-organization if you don't want to have some kind of an enlightened dictator of the world who says these are all the different tasks that people should do in the world.
Okay, so let's assume for...
Can I extrapolate on that?
Right.
Because from what I see, the really great added value of what you presented is trying to get these differences and trying to get the best task in one situation. But if we grab the concept behind it, why this is the best situation, and I'm pretty sure we are very good at copying, so once that will be there, a lot of people will look at that and say, okay, we have identified that particular criteria or aspect of the person that makes him wanting to do this, or how he reacts to this. They will copy and paste, I would say, that kind of information on other situations. And at the end, we will end up having like better translators or communicators with the computer tuned this way between people. And that will help the whole communication between humans. So
I mean, I agree that the methods you propose are very useful, but they're very useful, but they are not really adding a global perspective. What I mean is you're just having classical management tasks. You need to have a certain problem solved by a group of people, instead of having the group of people like in a company obeying the orders given by the different people in the different levels. You have a more distributed algorithm to distribute the work. But it's still the task that somebody has decided, like, this has to be done now.
No.
In that sense, the tasks are not globally coordinated.
It's a task that somebody has decided he or she wants to have it done, and he puts out a set of bits, and he or she throws it into the global scheduling mechanism that gets coordinated in whatever way it gets coordinated. If we were to use the system that was first shown, it would be some kind of marketplace, and then the marketplace would decide based on the budget allocated to each of these tasks. Which tasks take precedence over other tasks? I mean, I understand or I think I understand what you're getting at is what's missing for you here is this kind of meta scheduling of which tasks are more important than other tasks.
Yeah.
That is correct.
That's one way.
So the implicit assumption here is if we're using a market-based allocation mechanism for microtasks, the market will decide which tasks find an optimal allocation, which tasks find a full procurement that can be fulfilled. That kind of gets into the question that was raised before. You know, some tasks may not get all the people fulfilled, and the market will decide which tasks get scheduled at a higher priority and which tasks
So
get
you're
scheduled.
assuming that the market is doing the real global self-organization?
I'm assuming that if the coordination mechanism used by the operating system is a market, then the market will do it. All I said is, scratching on the surface of this, you could use a market. I'm not professing to be able to know anything more than scratching on the surface of three problems. I agree that the global scheduling or the global prioritization of what's more important than other things is an important question, and I'm unsure how this should be done, apart from, I guess, some of the methods that I would argue that I've learned over the past, and one of which is using market mechanisms. Another one is have a dictator decides. This is what's happening in computers. The dictator operating system decides. I'm not sure it's the worst method if the dictator it has our old welfare in mind. Dictators, the problem is most dictators don't. And you know, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. But it's unsure whether that's true, whether that would be true in a computational sense. I'm not saying it wouldn't be or it would be. I'm just saying I don't know. I wouldn't know. But there is this assumption that we have. We don't like centralized decision making. I think for many things, it may actually be better to have centralized decision making.
Well, I don't have an a priori bias against centralized decision making. In some cases, it is indeed more efficient. It's just that I don't believe that anybody has the cognitive capabilities to decide at the world level what are the priorities. No human, no computer has these cognitive capabilities. That's why it needs to be a distributed decision. And a distributed decision needs the equivalent of a global brain, a nervous system, where all people in the world, all are somehow available to provide input.
I would arguably buy this argument, yes. You had a question?
Yes, to me it rings the bell that I heard 20, 30, 40 years ago when systems were designed, and we're coming back to what's the optimum resource allocation.
Right.
What's the best price definition?
Right.
And how do you let nobody decide what the buy price is, because the price decides itself. That's
Right.
free market enterprise, right?
Right.
So we have a pure economic system here, which says, whatever the resources are, whatever the problem is, whatever it may be, I will need a market who can solve that problem. Because if I send my problem randomly in the open air, the chance somebody hits it is small. And maybe that's what Franz is saying. You launch your problem in the open air, somebody will catch it, somebody will give the best solution to it, and you will solve the problem. It's probably an ideal world. But if we have a problem, my problem is not the problem of the group, it's not the problem of the country, not the problem of the world. We transcend each time to the absolute lowest level of the individual, and everything changes all the time. Because my problem as an individual is solved by the specialist in 3 seconds. For me, it's a monumental problem. But the problem of the specialist or the super specialist is solved in 3 minutes. But how do you get to the super specialist? Eventually, you get that the super specialist who does not exist. So you transcend back all the time to which is the best level that I have access to solve my problem. And if this is the case, you solve all problems, but you don't have a system to do that.
Okay, so I'm not 100% sure I understand everything you said. Let me try and decompose what you said. Again, I'm not saying that the market is the only mechanism to do this. I'm just saying one way to allocate tasks is a market, and that's the one we've studied so far. I think there are other mechanisms. It's unclear to me what the properties of these other mechanisms are. I would be very happy if I would get this running with markets already on a limited set of tasks. maybe I'm very humble and not trying to solve the problems of the whole world. I'm very happy if I solve a couple of small problems of a set of individuals to start with. The second thing I'm hearing is, in order to be able to apply these mechanisms, you need marketplaces to determine the price of these goods. And that is a very big assumption, because A, certain goods may not be price enforceable. So, you know, like the famous network externalities, you know, pieces, the environment is not bidding for CO2, so somebody else, is not selling CO2 emission, so somebody needs to enforce this, and this is usually the government, and in other places it doesn't happen at all. So, you know, noise. Who enforces, who sells noise? Who sells the permits to make noise in front of my door at night? At the moment, nobody, so I have to have other mechanisms to enforce this. This is one thing. And yes, that's true. So I don't know what the solution there are, but there must be other solutions that needs to be taken place. So this is number two. The third thing I'm hearing is that there might be issues that are, for me, immense issues, for somebody else in the world, are minute issues. Well, my understanding of the basic mechanism of disintermediation and the fall of communication costs is that if there were an intermediator, if there were a broker that would take my problem, that is a minute problem for somebody else, and know who that other person is to whom it is a minute problem, the market would establish a fair price that takes my huge problem to the person to whom it is a minute problem, and establish a fair pricing such that that person would solve my minute problem.
That's, I think, where you're wrong, if I may say so.
Okay, fine.
That's why you let the market define the price. Francis looks for that good solution without the market price. Because it's almost an ideal world. The solution is there. Why should I ask a price if he asks me, how do I get from here to there? I tell him how to get from here to there. I don't ask him, give me $50 and I tell you. If you let the market define it, you have a whole different dynamic of resource allocation. And you do not have anymore an open brain system, which is what I hope the global brain is all about. How do you define a system where knowledge, true information, is accessible worldwide at free cost, no cost, at no cost. It's an ideal world, of course, but they're totally opposite to your and Francis' model. Totally opposite.
Okay, so let me go on the no cost.
But it's not solvable. Eh?
Let me go and talk about completely no cost on all information. I'm probably a child of too much economics lectures, and therefore I'm going to make some statements. First, the generation of information of the first unit of the first unit of this information is an extremely costly task. It takes a lot of time. I mean, here we are, we're all being paid by the government, and we have very cushy jobs, and they pay us to generate information. So the society sucks up the cost of paying us and generating scientific information, right? So arguably, it should be freely available because society already paid for it. I agree on that notion. But generally speaking, how do you incentivize people to A, generate information, people in general, and B, maintain it such that it has a high quality? If you do not pay certain minimal amounts of information, it may be, right, I said payment is one incentive mechanism, it may be that the other incentive mechanisms may not pick up the slack. And I'm saying again, it's one of the incentive mechanisms, and it's one of the incentive mechanisms we looked at. We didn't look at the others, but there is, law of happiness, and what was the last one? The side effect. I think the side effect is extremely, extremely powerful because most of the things we do out of side effect. So many things we do out of side effect.
How do you define the side effect?
Oh, it's the CAPTCHA thing. I'm actually not doing A, I'm doing B, but I'm doing A for somebody else whilst I'm doing B. That's what I call side effect. Side effect computing.
No, but I see the side effects more in the sense that you do something for yourself, and it happens to be used for somebody else as well. Like, you put a nice picture of your dog on the web, and somebody's looking exactly for a picture of that type of dog, and because you put it publicly, he can just use the picture and say, this is this very rare breed of Dalmatian dog, perfect picture.
Okay.
It doesn't cost you anything.
Why should I put it on the web?
Because you want to put it for yourself. You want your family to see it. Why should you Why should you ask money for that guy to
No,
copy your picture that you anyway wanted to put there?
I'm not going to put it up there for no reason whatsoever. I'm going to put it up there for one of the 4 reasons that I mentioned.
Yeah, you want to communicate your knowledge. That's basic to all human beings. You want to communicate.
People
what
have
you know.
intrinsic motives why they would like people to see their dog.
Right? So that is
everybody on Facebook puts
so that is love.
picture of their
That
dog
is
or their cat.
that is love or happiness, right? Love or fame, right? Love or fame. Yeah, I want to be loved by some people, and that's why I put the pictures online, or maybe it's self-love, right? I self-actualize.
I think you okay.
But anyway,
too individualistic about it. It's just people like to watch pictures, and if they can put it on Facebook or they put it just on their own computer, it's the same effort. So why shouldn't they put it on Facebook? That's what I would see as side effect. You do something for yourself, and the side effect is that others profit from it. And that's the essence of stigmology. In a stigmology case, you have an agent that sees a stimulus, acts on it because it's inbuilt to react to that kind of stimulus, and the result is that something changes that others can build further on.
It's inbuilt means that there is some kind of set of instructions somewhere around that are actually not optimal for that individual, but are optimal for the group as a whole, or whatever, right? I mean,
a nice example of this side effect is when you just want to play and you're using one of these these games that have been done by Google, for example, where you have to classify images, or you so you're playing, you're just taking out the boredom of you, you're enjoying yourself, but while you're doing, somebody else is taking advantage of a task being done.
But that is what he means, that's the programmed solution. What I'm speaking about is the spontaneous side effect. You put the photo of your dog on Facebook, somebody else was looking exactly for the photo of that kind of dog. He downloads it, you don't mind. You are offering a service for no cost.
You are arguing that the motivation for you to put this photo on there just came out of the thin air and is not the effect of thousands of years of social programming and social selection of how people act to help society as a whole to grow. That's also programmed. It's also programmed.
Okay, I agree. But what I'm saying is, I'm not doing it in order to get a particular reward, a particular material reward. I'm doing it to please myself. I'm not doing it for somebody else.
Why are you pleasing yourself? Because
I love my dog and I like my dog to be seen everywhere.
Recognition or the good of the society?
I still have a clarification question, but okay.
Why do we do that? Because we publish pictures and so on in order to extend our social network,
right?
To keep it with us. And this is industrialized by Facebook, for instance. And the main side effect of publishing a picture is not that somebody else can see it, but the main side effect is the fortune of Mark Zuckerberg, I would say. Because it's industrialized. Our desire to maintain our social networks through what is computer networks, etc., is industrialized, and the main side effect is the centralization and the fortune.
So you are arguing my side, right? You're arguing it's an economic it's a maximization of somebody's economic benefit. I'm saying it's one thing. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but it's definitely one thing that's happening there. One motivational. You had a clarification question, a simple one. Could I just say yes, yes, no, no, and you would add the questions to fit?
I'm not sure if that's going to be so easily solved, but I must have missed something. There must be a gap between the slides you presented that I didn't get. So you show this social engineering, right? That politicians make rules, and these rules create a medium specifically to have a population have a certain behavior, right? And I kind of understand where you're going with the different cultures and how that kind of affect the way they interact with it. what I don't really get is how we then go to the crowdsourcing. How does that relate to creating a medium for coordination? I didn't really get that because it looks more like a tool to me than a medium. And I was wondering, what did I miss there?
It is a medium for coordination. I mean, it's kind of an internal
What I'm saying, what I was saying is that programming languages that we use in a global social environment need abstractions that are robust against cognitive differences. And that one example that I picked is cultural differences in user interaction as one of the abstractions that we need in order to build efficient functional programs in a global setting.
So I got that part, but how then do you come with the book case where you have four?
Well, that's a different thing. That wasn't a programming language thing. That was a software engineering thing. The example of the book was an example where we use systematic exploration of the design space of possible solution in a practical setting to find the best solution.
So it didn't really relate anymore to the case
to the cultural thing?
No, to the politicians trying to create a medium for certain coordination. Because that would relate for me to the global brain.
It relates to the problem that the politicians have, and they actually have a much bigger problem, right? They need to set up a set of rules without being able to try them out, right? And you can't say, I mean, yeah, I know some science fiction authors who write about that, right? About super societies who spawn sub-societies, and each of them they give a different set of laws, and they see how to develop, and then they decide which one's the best set of laws. But we can't really afford to run these experiments on Earth. So essentially, we had these people in Congress, or these people, I don't know when the Belgian Constitution was written, but the people in Switzerland around, the 1850s, 60s 1840s, 50s, 2 centuries ago, who had to decide on a set of rules, and they couldn't run experiments. So they looked around and said, so what kind of experiments do we observe around us? And they looked north, and they looked south, and they looked at the US and thought, that seems like a successful experiment. And then had a Greek guy take it and rewrite the experiment in their own goal, to suit their own goals. Kind of, taking a working program and morph it into something that will work in their environment. I mean, for example, we don't have a president, right? So they got rid of that part of the Constitution. That was the analogy on their end. And what I was saying, the beauty of, the setting of some global brain setting is that you have so many people out there and so many resources that you might be able to do some experiments. Obviously, you don't want to run experiments with constitutions, but you can run some experiments of some more simple things because you can just afford to run them multiple times.
By the way, you know that in Australia they have been experimenting with writing a new constitution via a wiki?
I didn't know that. I'm looking
know whether the experiment is successful or it has already been finished.
I'm looking forward to seeing the results. I know there are some people who are trying to use large-scale deliberation platforms to find solutions to global warming and stuff. I mean,
yeah, no, that's the work of Mark Klein.
So I understand that the example of translating the book in 4 hours is basically to say that you can do the same for trying to create constitutions. Is that a relation?
No. The result, the program that can translate the book in 4 hours is the outcome of a software engineering process that employs massive parallel experimentation, which is possible due to the global brain and would have not been possible if I would have wanted to run this program at the university with 900 undergraduate students and assign them into different groups and run each of the translation processes in parallel. I could not allocate a sufficient number of people to do this kind of, and I'm going to call it by the software engineering term, kind of regression testing to ensure to find the right thing. That is what I'm saying.
I think I now better understand. I wanted to ask you, what's the advantage of cutting up a translation task in such small units as single sentences? Wouldn't it be more efficient to let people translate larger parts at once because they see more of the context?
Okay, now.
But if it's a speed, then you need massive parallelism.
So the cutting up into parts obviously gives you parallelism. It also, again, so this was run on Mechanical Turk. People on Mechanical Turk expect to run tasks that are finished in a very, 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 very short time period. So if you give them tasks that are too long, they will just not do them. That is a side effect, if you want to say so, of the specific human computation market that we use to run our experiment. It is not necessarily true for these programs in general. So it's an optimal program for this setting rather than the general setting of the global brain. But that is going to be true in any program that you want to deploy is that you have some settings, you allocate these people in some way or means, and they're going to come with predisposition as to what they're doing and how they're being compensated or not for what they're doing, right? If you are in a forum of dog lovers, right, and you post your image, there is an expectation of what you do on the dog forums lover homepage where you post doggy pictures and what you want to get. There is a set of expectations. If you ask those people to do something that's against their set of expectations, you will get to an inefficient program. Now, that's part of this result of this program. I think, that, again, the nugget to take away of this is you can run massive experimentation in such a setting where you have so many people. It's not, this is a cool program.
I've heard so many things in your text, but are you saying that you can reduce a complex task to a large number of non-complex tasks and then reconstruct a complex task, i.e. a complex text, complex book, that you reduce into elementary phrases which are easily translated by almost anybody, and then with these reconstruct your book, which is a complex system?
So I'm saying that for book translation, that's the case.
Okay.
And it was not expected. I mean, if you go and talk to people who do professional translations, they will tell you, you will never get a good translation out of it. And what was surprising to us that we could go to professionals, and they said, that actually sounds reasonable. If you go to professional translators, by the way, and you tell them you can do good translation with machine translation, they will tell you it doesn't work. My post-editing of this machine translation will take me more time if I do it from scratch. The interesting part was, in our system, is we took very, very basic, freely available machine translation, Google Translate, and we were able to get it to a level where people said you did 90% of our work. And we can actually take this, and now a unilingual lecture can read through this and improve the text to a level where it's actually a good text. I mean, I think that is a massive thing. I'm saying this worked for translation. I am not saying this works for all tasks. I'm sure there are tasks where the intellectual capability of being able to put it in terms of decomposable tasks is insanely expensive. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there are tasks where this is possible.
The interesting thing is which kind of tasks can be decomposed in such a way. That's part of your operating system for the global data.
Yes, it is an enormously interesting thing, and so maybe I need to say something. So this whole thing springs out of the philosophy of somebody like Alan Kay, right? If you want to predict the future, you need to build it. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build building blocks for how a global brain could be assembled and built. And I am investigating the little parts that I can assemble. I think there are lots of things that I'm not doing. I mean, there are other ways of motivating people. It's definitely something that we've not looked at. There's 3 people working on this. It's not like a team with this institute of 500 people. There's 3 people. I have two PhD students and a professor, right? So there's a small group of people, and we're starting to investigate, this little part and this little part. I think altruistic behavior, and I'm just going to call it altruistic behavior, is an extremely fascinating area. And it's fascinating to find out, why do people do things that is not for money, fame, love, or whatever? And I know there are people who study this. I don't know what kind of arguments they come up with other than repeated gain, it pays off in the long time, etc. I know there are people who study this, and I should just talk to the economists in our faculty, and they will come with answers to it. I mean, there's a whole bunch of economists who do nothing else but study altruistic behavior. I don't know it.
One of the problems is that the economists start with a bias against altruistic behavior, which makes it difficult for them to explain it. If you start with a different approach, then altruism is less mysterious.
So I'll talk to the Faculty of Divinity rather than economics to get good results.
Evolutionary biology is the best.
To evolutionary biology. Okay, it's efficient for making sure the genes survive and replicate as quickly as possible. Okay.
Can I ask a little?
I'm not the master of ceremonies here.
Well, we go on for a few hours. So here, but trying to understand that it is about scaling up cognition, distributed cognition, scaling, amplifying cognition. But I still have a problem to see it as programming the global brain. I don't really understand how you go from crowdsourcing to that part. So could you try to elaborate it a little bit, like when does something stop being a crowdsourcing tool and when does it become a global brain tool in your view?
You see, I don't see this strong differentiation the way you do it. I don't think it needs to encompass everything and everybody and anything and the global scheduling mechanism and my kitchen sink in order to become the global brain.
No, but okay,
I think there is this system out there called the global brain.
Let me ask it differently. Is your mind your brain?
Is my mind my brain? Oh
yes.
God, I don't know.
No, that's
I have no idea. I have no idea.
I'd like to bring in, because I just asked like how many biologists are there in the room, and there used to be one biologist. Well, I was trained as a biologist, so there are two now. But I'm a bit surprised about the parallel that people make between global brain and actual human brain, because the human brain has a very specific topology of the neurons and connections.
Thank you.
And there is no degree of freedom whatsoever to have it functioning without exactly that topology. If you go to the global brain that we talk about now, we speak about it as if all kinds of actions, of agents, whatever, mix up and produce together something that, at least I'm in doubt how to understand what's happening here, produces something that is intelligent or performs a task or whatever. And I can see no task that it can perform because it is open. The only task that it performs and why it structures is that it degrades energy. And there is a constructal law, which I haven't heard about here anything at all so far. The constructal law is a law that tells if there is a flow system, it will optimize for a lot of flow through the system. That is a very, very broad category of law, and it is a thermodynamic law. It's introduced by Adriaan Bejan, and well, of course you can have thoughts about it, but as far as I can see in biology, it works perfectly well. As far as I can see for river settings, for shaping landscape, it works perfectly well. And why should it not work for the open position of how a global brain takes shape and what it will perform? And I think we should have different discussions about whether we talk about an open system, like the global brain of actors that don't know whatever, and are not interfaced by sensors, or a human brain which has a strict topology and is interfaced by sensors, and by that means has its own functioning compared to the world. So there are different kinds of discussions mixed in this one discussion that we try to have here, in my view.
In every organism you have the physiology and then you have the control mechanism of that physiology. The physiology, that's what will be described by your flows and by your thermodynamics. But the control mechanism, that's what the brain eventually is the information part that says this flow should go there or this flow should go there. And that's what the global brain or the internet or the computer or crowdsourcing or whatever you speak does. It's moving the economic flows, the flows of matter and energy, that's what you're speaking about. But the decision, should this flow go to there or to there, that's what happens, and that happens at the level of information. And there you can't measure it via pure thermodynamics.
Without disputing, because I'm not here to dispute, but to contribute. If you look at what the neurons do, every neuron does not know what it does. So there's an easy parallel with the world where computers do things without knowing what they do, people do things without knowing how they contribute to the system, neural nice schemes contribute to solving problems without knowing what that means for the rest of the system. So the overall system may actually contribute something that we see as similar to what happens in the brain. And then a small remark that I really insist on making there is that neurons do their interactions in a very specific way. So it's not just any interaction that's accepted there. It's not just information that is sort of in a very general way, utile to do that. So you need neurons to interact in a very specific way to make that sort of brain. So you need, if I as a biologist would talk about the global brain, I would design a neural strategy for interaction.
Well, I would like to, I mean, if you think about the brain plasticity research, you see that other parts of your brain can easily take over functions, so it's not really that complicated.
No,
but it's very limited.
It is a bit. I mean, now we get again different.
Right.
Discussion. It is not very located, but your brain has parts which, by millions of years of evolution, have become specialized, hardwired, as a region, be good in certain tasks, like storing something, connecting something, whatever. Then I return to the discussion that we had last week about the bees. I made a very stupid remark. At least I felt like it was here, because I said the bees are programmed by the gene of the queen to do what they do.
Yes.
And the response was a bit like, genes don't control anything, genes are just there. Not a very smart remark. What I meant was a gene programs for a neural network, which is hardwired by evolution. It has reflexes. The reflexes determine behavioral repertoire. The behavioral repertoire determines the behavior of the colony. So if the queen has bad genes, she has a badly functioning colony.
I'm very sorry, maybe I take a different stance than other people. I'm very thankful for this remark, because I think we all have this image of what the brain does, and we project capabilities into this brain, and we take this projection, and now happens the second analogy projection. We take this projection and we project it into the global brain, right? So, and therefore we attribute certain capabilities to this global brain that may or may not be part of our more correct or less correct understanding of how the human brain works. I think the global brain is a wonderful analogy, and like every other analogy, it breaks wonderfully down if you take it too far. There are certain things where having done just 1 year worth of sabbatical research on some stuff that happens in the brain, I mean, there is so much stuff happening in the brain that if you don't train it in the first 6 months of your life, it will never happen again. Any brain plasticity is not going to help you to overcome this problem. This is the R versus L problem of people from Japan. It is because they don't hear it in the first 6 months of their life. They don't develop in A1, right, in the auditory cortex 1, they don't develop the capability of differentiate between those two sounds. That's it. Game over. Anyway, you're going to go. Okay, but we can argue this. We can argue this for a long time. But it is very interesting that we all have this image, and then we carry it over to the analogy, and then we think the analogy needs to adhere to these different images.
Is it not a mix of termination, though? The brain, signification of brain there, the signification of brain there is different. So why call that a brain?
Yeah.
It's not a brain, it's something else. It's a combination of it's not a brain.
That's difficult.
Because analogies make it easier to focus the mind, because you recognize something in it, and an analogy, as he says, is never perfect. But it gives you a better understanding, and I would call it the globally distributed information processing network.
If I would have called it the global distributed ecosystem for processing distributed information tasks, I probably would have been in this room alone, and the talk would have been over very quickly. The VUB would have saved all kinds of money to fly me in, right? You would be here?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. You deserve some Swiss chocolate on top of Belgian chocolate, right? But I think what's interesting and useful in this discussion is that my notion of brain and your notion of brain and your notion of brain, the fact that it differentiates, it leads to these discussions. And I think one thing that I completely, truly agree, and it's probably not the way you would frame it, is I'm trying to think and construct elements of what makes up this thing bottom up. I'm not trying to do it top down. I'm trying to do it bottom up. I'm clearly a bottom up kind of guy with this kind of research. I'm trying to build blocks. I'm at the level of making sure that this screw is a screw that can be used. I'm not even building the steam engine yet. I'm trying to build the screw. And you're trying to build the steam engine.
Problem solving.
And that is, maybe that is that, my first education was as an engineer, and I'm still in the bottom of my heart, I'm an engineer. I'm trying to build something that is useful and that can solve a problem. And I think that is, I think, the problem in communication. You're saying, well, why aren't you thinking of the global scheduling infrastructure? And I think, because if I don't know how the screws look like, I have nothing to schedule. That is, I think, the disconnect in the discussion.
He assigns your technology, and the tool cannot exist without them.
Okay, so I'm going to call up ETH and tell them to make me a good job offer because I'm really an engineer and not a scientist.
No, I didn't say that. He is a scientist. You're an engineer in talking now, right?
Okay,
I think one thing we all agree about, I think, is that the essence is coordination. You have many agents doing different things, and you want to do them in a coordinated way. So that is something we both agree on. Let's say the difference is you want to build up the coordination from the bottom up, program it, do a particular task. We are looking at how this coordination may self-organize from the global level down. But it's coordination. I think we all agree on coordination, and that the internet is what makes, as you said, the costs of coordinations have come down enormously. That's why this coordination will appear sooner or later, whether it's programmed or whether it's self-organized or otherwise, it will come there. And that's what will make the global brain, that all these things will become coordinated.
Yeah, the computer scientists cannot exist without computer language, without computer program. and how do you develop something without a language and a program?
Or vice versa.
Francis, may I ask you a question? Like, what do you, because you say now coordination from the global level down, and that seems to sort of a bit a different viewpoint.
Well, coordination always happens locally. I mean, you always start by locally interacting, and then you find out that this interaction is more or less efficient or useful, and then you try to find a better form of interaction so you create synergy. But what I mean by the global level down is that I'm saying I see the process of self-organizing coordination taking place everywhere, in all spheres of life, in all countries, at all levels. And I see kind of like, it's like a nervous system. Suppose that you drop a lot of neurons into a pan, into some kind of a liquid with nutrients, they will tend to go towards each other and start to form some kind of a neural network. There are experiments like that. So what we are now at the stage where these neurons are starting to find each other and starting to connect, but it's not very coordinated yet. So what he's thinking is, let me think of the best way of putting a number of neurons together to do this particular task. I'm thinking about, I see all these neurons in the heap, I know that they have a tendency to go towards each other. What is likely to emerge out of that? But in both cases, it's the connection that are being formed, and that's the coordination part.
I would like your view, but as a biologist, I have difficulty with you calling these systems now neurons, because the systems are systems, and they coordinate their behavior. But neurons would do that in a different way, so they would totally not come up with the same result. So you can talk about them as if they are neurons. You can do that. But they are no neurons. So there will be connections, there will be coordination maybe. And then the question is, what do you call coordination?
Well, that will come to coordination theory. Very quickly summarized, for me, for my view of coordination, you need 4 aspects. Alignment of goals, that means that you're not working at cost purposes. Division of labor, that means that you decompose the task into different subtasks, and you send each subtask to the agent that is best at doing it. Aggregation, that means after each agent has done its task, you put the pieces together again. And workflow, if different tasks need to be done in a certain order, you make sure that they are all done in the right order. So these 4 things for me: alignment, division of labor, workflow, aggregation. That's in essence what I call coordination. I don't know whether you want to add something to that.
No.
But the alignment is eventually the goal.
Can I ask a question to
The alignment is on something
he's still here.
that may become a goal when it's aligned.
Yeah, but Frans is going to be here next week, so
Yeah,
let's try to focus on Abraham and ask questions to him. And I still have a question because I mean I've still
Absolutely, absolutely. Go ahead. I mean, if you would have no questions anymore, then I would be selling you some religion, right?
Okay, you can try to.
Well, this is a free university, so I'm trying not to sell any religion.
Well, the example when you pushed it to mechanical Turk and it failed, right?
Right.
What I'm trying to, I mean, first of all, I find it very interesting as a research on stigmergy, because it's stigmergy. We know it as a concept, but it's still very hard to actually do some interesting experiment that gives us some very concrete feedback on it. And one of the things that you see in stigmergy is that when a sign puts an agent into action, the action takes time. There's a certain amount of time for the action to do. For example, the aunt builds for a certain amount of minutes, and he stops at a certain moment. So there are defined kind of moments to stop. And if I understand you well, that because of the design of the mechanical Turk, you had to divide it into one sentences. Maybe that's an interesting place to see that one sentence is too short to see it as a full stigmergic cycle. You see what I'm heading at? I was wondering how you look at it. So like if we could try to do the same experiment in another environment, in other crowdsourced medium, where we, for example, could send paragraphs instead of sentences, and see how the feedback from that comes back, we may actually get better insight on what is the duration of the action, so how long does the process need to be to call it a good stigmergic action for some organization.
So the question you're asking is not about the experiment that failed on Mechanical Turk. It's about the translation experiment that actually went fabulously on Mechanical Turk. We translated a book in 4 hours, right? I mean, I want you to point me to somebody else who did that. We went fabulously. Francis's question was, is a sentence, why is the sentence an efficient size? That was the question. At least that's what it. And I said, we did not do any robustness checking on size of fragments, right? I think, and so now you're asking me, is there some deeper meaning in the marketplace? Because the rationale that I gave, it could be that if you take paragraphs, then the marketplace will not be the right marketplace because people are used to do quick tasks. So let me free flow associate about size in this specific question. I think there are problems where the tasks can be decomposed into minute parts, and it will not be bad for the problem that happens. I think there are other problems that if you do that, the coordination overhead of putting these things back together again, that you get useful results, is so high that the division is not worth it. I mean, in some sense, you're asking is, I have a program, computer scientist, trained as a computer scientist, trained and bred as a computer. I have a program. What is the Amdahl's factor? How well can I parallelize it? How small can the pieces be? Or at some point, the chopping up into little pieces is going to be possible, but putting it together again in a useful way is going to cost me more than what I gain through the parallelism. That is the question you're really asking. Now, translating it back to the sentence thingy, I have no intuition whatsoever whether this is the most efficient partition, a sentence. All I hope is that, 2,000 years worth of language development, or however long, has given us this thing called a sentence, a statement. Now, obviously, if you read a statement by Adorno in German that goes over 3 pages, that may not be an optimal sentence size. If you have your typical English sentence, which barely goes more longer than a line, I mean, that's the first thing we learn when I have a new graduate student. If the person is German speaking, I usually say, okay, now you take every comma you put in this sentence, replace it with a full stop, and now you rewrite your text. And usually that's a good thing to do, and you get a better English text. But nonetheless, I think all this time, the structure of a sentence as a statement was developed for something. It is a unit of information of some sorts, and so my hope is that it gave us some indication of a good size. There's no evidence whatsoever that I have for you. I'm not a linguist. I haven't tried this. It's a pure piece of intuition conjecture.
Complex.
Right.
The idea of context may be added maybe to your program. If you give a sentence, which is if you work in 3 sentences and only let them translate the middle sentence, because then they see what it comes from. They translate just the little piece, which is the middle piece, and they know where it goes to. And then they can maybe improve their translation.
So remember, they don't translate. They rewrite sentences that are already in English. Secondly, in the second step, we put the sentences together. But I do think it is an interesting question as to whether they get better whether the effort of rewriting the fluency of the paragraph gets better if the rewriting of the sentence was already contextualized with a sentence. By the way, in other experiments that we wrote, we found that some of the problems are not solvable, some of the translation problems are not solvable without greater contextual knowledge. I'll give you an example. We took a text editorial from a newspaper and put it in the system. And we have political parties, just like you, and they usually have 3-letter acronyms. We found out that translating some of these things to English, those 3-letter acronyms were assumed to be companies, and it was written like it was a company. Now you could argue a political party is really a company that optimizes on power and not on economic output, and not on dividends, but on money to their members, but that would be a very cynical thing to do. But nonetheless, it was very interesting to us to read that this is actually a good translation if the Socialist Party or the People's Party or the Catholic Party, whatever, if they were a company and not a political party. So there is greater contextual knowledge that was missing, not just the sentence, right? The sentence context, the world knowledge, so to say, in this specific context of this text. So again, I don't know, and the goal of the purpose is not to build the best possible translation task. Otherwise, again, I should spin off and have my private jet wait out there after we sold the company. The goal of the purpose was showing that you can actually explore a large design space due to the abundant availability of people who are prepared to do work. Yeah. And that's what the Galaxy Zoo people found out, right? So the Hubble telescope has generated thousands and thousands of images nobody will ever look at. Oh, sorry, no astrophysicist will ever look at, because if you take all the astrophysicists in the world and give it to all the people, the time it takes them to look at it divided by the number of pictures divided by, right? That's it. Hubble will never, you just don't have enough people. And there is this lady, this Dutch lady, who now has a astronomical phenomenon named after her, because she looked at one of those images at the galaxy, and below the galaxy there was the smudge on the image, and she asked, well, it's obviously one of these galaxies, but she put it in the forum that's associated with this task. Who the heck knows what this thing on the bottom left of this image is? This looks cool. And this discussion got going in this forum, and it's now called Hanny's, and I'm not going to try to pronounce it. It's called Hanny's anomaly, and anomaly in Dutch, and I'm sure you can pronounce this very well. Look it up in Wikipedia, it's there. Why? Because she found it. So this is some person, private person, who was going on to Galaxy Zoo. I think therein lies the enormous capability that we can do this. Now he's going to come and say, see, she didn't do it for money. Yeah, she did it because she felt it's a good thing to contribute to science.
And because it's part of her capability of doing it, it's part of her. It comes out of her. I won't be able to do that because that's...
Well, I'm capable of doing a great many things, which I'm actually not doing. Not because I not have a good heart, but because I desire to do other things. So if I feel like I should go to my daughter's school and teach them about something, because I think it's a good thing to do, I will not go and spend my free time in a soup kitchen. So I have some motivation. Both of them are altruistic tasks. Well, maybe not my daughter involved, but let's say in a few years when my daughter is not in that school anymore, both of them are altruistic tasks, and I choose to allocate my time to one or the other. There is some mechanism that allows me and compels me to choose how I allocate my time. Still, it may not be money-oriented. I completely agree. As a matter of fact, many things go, especially in volunteering, break when you apply money to it, and there's people who study that in the crowdsourcing domain as well, because you anchor the value of the task by saying, I will pay some people, but others not. Right? There is an anchoring effect. I completely agree. But I have some means of prioritizing. And that was a discussion we had yesterday. Is it only prioritizing, or is it actually is it necessary that it's scalable? You know, it's a scalar size. And I don't know. I don't have an answer for this. But there needs to be at least some way to prioritize. Because I do this prioritization. I decide not to go to the soup kitchen, but go to the school. How do I do this? Why do I do this? I have, probably because somewhere in me I think it's actually more efficient or something.
Yeah, I'll ask that question. The reason you answer that question, you do it. You do it.
I don't just do it. There is a reason why I do it. Maybe I was programmed by the Queen, right?
No, this is a philosophy underlying what we call a mobilization system. A mobilization system mobilizes people to do things that they would like to do, but for that it needs to find out what the people would like to do, and it tries to create an environment where they can do it as efficiently as possible, so that they would say, well, actually, I can do that without much effort, and I like to do it, so I'll do it.
Right, so that's Galaxy Zoo. That is Galaxy Zoo, right? It's a mobilization system for people who like to donate their time to science. Period. And they do it because they feel it's good for humanity as a whole. And they decide not to go to their daughter's school and give remedial lessons in French, German, English, Dutch, whatever your favorite language is at this point, but they decide to spend the time online with Galaxy Zoo. Now, and I think my point is, how does this decision happen? That decision happens in some way, and we have no clue, or we should find out how, because it's a major question on prioritization on the individual level within this thing that we can call the global brain, or this, we should have an acronym for it, like with 20 letters, right, that gives some nice words that then can be translated, and then we can apply to the EU for getting lots of funding for something like this.